Welcome back to the deep dive. This is the segment where we really, we try to take these huge shifting topics and just distill them into something essential, something fascinating, and hopefully really useful for you. And for those of you who follow the Bronner Funeral Program Site podcast, this is actually our third deep dive. And the topic today is, well, it's a big one. It's fundamentally transforming one of the most unchanging human experiences, loss and remembrance.
It really is. The pace of technological change, it often just outstrips our ability to process the ethical or psychological side of it. And you really don't see that more clearly anywhere than in memorialization.
Right.
We're moving away from this idea, this assumption that death creates a sort of final static archive. That's just not the case anymore.
Absolutely. And so our mission today is, I'd say, pretty ambitious. We are going to track the evolution of memorials all the way from the really tangible printed items you can hold in your hand.
Yeah, the classic funeral program.
Exactly. And then move through that critical pivot point into screen-based digital experiences. And from there, we're pushing headfirst into the real frontier of the digital afterlife. The use of these highly sophisticated AI avatars, sometimes called, a bit critically, dead bots, which are created from a person's entire digital footprint.
And that journey is so necessary because it forces us to confront this fundamental paradox. These new technologies, this whole field of grief tech, they offer this profoundly powerful sense of comfort, a continuation of connection that was, just unimaginable a few years ago.
Unimaginable, yeah.
But at the very same time, they introduce incredibly serious ethical, psychological, and legal questions. We have to keep asking ourselves for this deep dive. Are we pursuing genuine comfort and healing? Or are we, accidentally creating an illusion that trades healthy acceptance for a kind of perpetual digital dependency?
That tension, that really fine line between comfort and illusion, that's our focus today. So let's unpack this whole evolution by starting right where tradition first met technology. Before the cloud, before everything was digital, a memorial service had to be concrete, right? The tangible object, that was the anchor for the memory. Let's ground ourselves in that tradition for a minute because understanding the complexity of those paper products really helps you appreciate what the digital revolution is replacing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
That tangible history of memorialization is incredibly detailed. When you look at the historical breadth of memorial products, the sheer variety and the specificity of the printed formats, it just jumps out at you. These weren't just, simple handouts.
Yeah.
They were structured, multi-page documents. They were designed for utility, yes, but also for preservation.
Could you maybe elaborate a bit on that? Like, why were those specific formats, the gatefold versus, say, a graduated program, why are they so important? What did the design actually do?
It really all comes down to utility and the intended emotional experience. You had your foundational items, like the standard funeral bulletins, which were often just a single fold, right?
Right.
They provided the bare service details.
The basics.
The basics. But then you moved into these really specialized folding formats, and those were designed for maximum information and, well, aesthetics.
Okay.
Take the gatefold funeral programs, for example. These open out like double doors, creating this beautiful centerpiece display. They were really favored when a family wanted something substantial, something aesthetically pleasing that could hold a lot of photos or extensive thank yous or poems.
I see. So it felt more curated.
Exactly. It felt more intimate and handcrafted. Now, in contrast, you had the graduated funeral programs or things like funeral booklets and brochures. They solved a more logistical problem. They provided multiple pages of information in a really clear sequential flow. So if the service had a complex order of worship or multiple readings or a really extensive obituary detailing a long, rich life, the graduated program gave you the necessary real estate without becoming overwhelming. They were all about utility and archives.
So it sounds like whether it was the multi-page structure of the graduated format or that specialized display of a gatefold, the common thread was that they were designed to be, robust takeaways, something you kept.
Precisely. They reinforced the significance of the service. And as our source material highlights, the tangibility went way beyond just the program. Families relied on this whole suite of physical keepsakes to create a lasting memory. Things like memorial cards, funeral thank you cards.
Right, and even supplementary physical items. Things designed to be actively used or displayed. I'm thinking of memorial bookmarks, memorial candles, the wearable memorial button pins, and even those larger outdoor keepsakes like memorial garden flags, wind chimes, and memorial garden stones.
The key takeaway from all of this tradition is that the physicality provided a material anchor for grief and remembrance. Holding that object or placing the stone or lighting the candle, That was part of the ritualized process of acceptance. It was a really accessible, tactile reminder.
Which brings us right to the moment of transition. When did that material anchor start to become secondary to the screen?
The official pivot point, as it's identified in our source material, is really the introduction and adoption of the digital memorials collection. This was the explicit recognition that, modern services are often geographically dispersed.
People are all over the world.
Exactly. You have hybrid attendance, and they demand screen-based, paperless tributes designed for immediate consumption and sharing. The goal wasn't just to digitize the paper program, it was to create these flexible, easily accessible solutions that adapt to today's communication methods.
And what's really fascinating to me is how this new digital world still acknowledged that lingering human need for something physical to, access the data. They created a bridge, not a wall.
That bridge is the QR code. It's brilliant, really. While the final product, the program, the video, the guest book, is inherently digital.
Right.
The QR code is the physical key. You can print it onto existing, smaller physical stationery like a prayer card, or just display it on signage at the service. And that allows for instant access with just a phone camera. The information lives digitally, but the mechanism to unlock it really respects that tradition of the physical takeaway.
That synergy is so critical. It provides the immediacy you need from a digital platform, instant sharing, link-based access through text or email, while still giving the in-person attendee a physical artifact to take home.
Let's delve a bit deeper into the specific functions of these digital solutions because they show a huge upgrade in information density and coordination.
For sure. The foundational element is the digital-only paperless funeral program. And this isn't just a PDF. That's important. It's optimized for screen viewing.
Meaning the text and images scale appropriately on a phone, a tablet, a computer, or even a large TV display during the service. Its core function is to be comprehensive, sharing all the service details, the full obituary, the order of service, and a curated selection of photos.
And the flexibility here is crucial. It shows real foresight. Because while it's designed to be paperless, the designers knew that certain family members, maybe older relatives or those with, limited tech access, they still need that tactile connection.
Right.
So the digital file can still be printed as a physical keepsake if someone wants it. It doesn't force a full conversion. It provides a real plus for digital convenience while still respecting those traditional needs.
Absolutely. And moving beyond just the program, the online guest books represent a major sociological shift. They transform the act of offering condolences from just a physical signature in a book to this digitally accessible space for sharing memories, messages, photos. This is critical for remote participation.
It effectively just removes the geographical constraints of grieving.
Precisely. A loved one halfway across the world can click a link or scan that QR code and leave a really meaningful, immediate tribute. And again, this isn't purely ephemeral. Those digital condolences can often be saved and printed out later, compiling that digital archive into a final, tangible family record.
Okay, now let's look at the purely visual elements because that's where technology really takes over. You mentioned a distinction between the slideshow and the video tribute.
Yes. The memorial slideshow is typically a photo and text presentation. It's a dynamic assembly of static elements. You'll often see it used as a looping display during the viewing or the reception. It functions primarily as a displayed archive.
Okay.
The memorial video tribute, though, is more involved. It's a full video remembrance that integrates photos, actual video clips, and music. It creates a narrative arc that's designed to evoke deep emotion.
So the video tribute is inherently more immersive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And both of these are strictly screen-based formats, shared via link or streamed on any device. They don't have a printing option for the final product because their value lies in that dynamic motion and sound. And these formats, they become a cornerstone of the digital keepsake bundle.
Which is really the ultimate logistical solution for a modern memorial service.
It's the unified approach. It coordinates all these different elements, the digital program, the slideshow or video, and the guest book, into one seamless system. A single master link or QR code grants access to all coordinated aspects of the tribute.
And that solves the logistical headache of trying to distribute, 3 or 4 different digital files or links to hundreds of guests?
Yeah.
So this first section really establishes that this transition from physical paper to screen-based bundles was mainly a logistical triumph. It made the information and the sharing of a service vastly more efficient. But we are still fundamentally talking about archiving a person's memory, saving their stories, their images. The next phase of technology, it attempts to move beyond archiving and into reanimation. And here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit unsettling.
Yeah, we now have to move beyond just efficient memorialization and into the realm of, well, technological simulation. And this shift really demands that we have clear definitions for these rapidly evolving concepts.
Okay, so let's make sure we're all speaking the same language. What exactly are we talking about when we say grief tech?
Grief tech is the big umbrella term. It refers to any technology specifically designed to help people cope with loss, preserve memories, and this is the critical part, maintain emotional connections after death. It's an entire sector dedicated to digitally mitigating the impact of absence. It covers everything from simple memorial websites all the way to advanced AI.
And the larger philosophical context, the digital afterlife, that's changed dramatically in just the last few years, hasn't it?
It really has. Historically, the digital afterlife just meant your static legacy. Your old Facebook profile, the photos stored in the cloud. Now, it describes the continuation of a person's digital presence that extends way beyond those static elements. It's moving into the realm of interactive artificial intelligence. The presence is no longer passive, it responds and communicates.
Interactive is the leap. We're not just looking at a photo anymore, we're potentially engaging in a dynamic exchange. This brings us to the mechanics. How are these AI avatars or chatbots actually built? I mean, what's the technical process of constructing a digital personality that sounds and responds like a deceased loved one?
This is where we get into deep learning and just massive data processing. The creation of these avatars, it requires training very sophisticated models using an incredibly large data set of the deceased person's communications.
So everything they ever wrote online.
Everything. Texts, emails, voice recordings, photos, videos. This huge accumulated digital footprint is fed into a neural network to create a functional conversational model.
So the quantity and I guess the quality of that digital life directly correlates to the fidelity of the avatar then.
Absolutely. The model learns the person's unique linguistic patterns, their common phrases, their typical tone, their humor, their level of formality, and all the facts it can glean about them. The goal is really complex. It's to enable the AI to respond in ways that aren't just grammatically correct, but that closely resemble how that specific person spoke or behaved or even thought.
So the AI isn't simply archiving information, it's engaging in natural language processing. It's trying to predict what the person would have said in a given context, based on all their past inputs.
That's a crucial distinction we have to make. The AI operates on two main modes here, retrieval and generation. Some services focus on retrieval AI, which just pulls pre-recorded answers or pre-vetted memories. This provides a more controlled archival experience.
Okay, that makes sense.
But others rely on generative AI, which creates entirely new responses based on learned patterns. And this is much more immersive, but it also introduces some significant ethical and psychological risks, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Let's bring this to life with some of the specific real-world examples you've cited, starting with that more controlled application.
Okay, so you see services like Hereafter AI. These often operate on that retrieval model we just talked about. The concept here is that the individual, while they're still alive, records extensive stories, memories, and answers to common questions.
So they're building their own archive, essentially.
Exactly. The AI then just acts as an interface to those pre-recorded answers after the person passes. It allows families to, say, query the avatar and hear the deceased person answer in their own voice about their life experiences.
That puts the control of the narrative entirely in the hands of the individual during their life, which feels like a powerful way to preserve a legacy with really clear boundaries.
It's the least ethically fraught model, for sure. It's aiming for preservation rather than simulation. But then you have the more speculative, immersive concepts, which lean heavily into generative models, like the replica-style companion.
Right.
These systems, whether they started as just general AI companions or are specifically trained on a deceased person's data, they aim for a continuous conversational relationship.
So this is moving from preserving old memories to actually simulating an ongoing relationship. That feels like a much bigger technological and emotional undertaking.
It is. The goal is to provide a persona that is always available to talk, offering comfort through a simulated presence. It requires the AI to be highly adaptive and capable of producing original, contextually relevant conversations, going way beyond just retrieving old anecdotes.
And finally, there's the visual component, the tools that offer that fleeting moment of reanimation.
Right, we're talking about the animated photo tools. These take static images, like an old portrait, and use deep learning to apply subtle movements, expressions, or even synchronized speech based on pre-recorded audio or a synthesized voice. This is perhaps the most immediately visceral application, creating a really powerful and often unsettling sense of presence from a still photograph.
The functional variations are just vast, but they all share that core aim of reducing the finality of death through digital intervention. Some prioritize that rich storytelling, others focus intensely on recreating the voice or the visual likeness. As we pivot to the psychological impact, we really need to understand that this technology is growing so rapidly because it taps into a fundamental human need.
Yes, and this rapid growth is driven by that profound human need for continued connection. Grief is, at its core, the psychological and emotional result of a severed bond. These technologies offer a simulated restoration of that bond, and for many people, that is just an irresistible offer.
Let's explore the specific emotional mechanics of that. Why is hearing a familiar voice so potent, particularly when the user knows, rationally, that it's generated by code?
It hits directly at our innate psychological drive for attachment. When someone is gone, the brain really struggles to internalize the finality of it. Hearing a familiar voice or revisiting a unique personal story or engaging in a conversation, even a simulated one, can provide a kind of cognitive dissonance that helps ease the initial shock. For the grieving person, the comfort found in that sensory connection acts as a powerful, immediate antidote to the silence and absence they're facing.
And beyond that immediate comfort, there's also the goal of legacy preservation for future generations, which is a very practical aim.
Absolutely. Families are driven by the goal of ensuring that the personality of the deceased survives, not just their name and dates on a headstone. A static obituary can't capture a grandparent's unique laugh or their specific way of telling a tall tale. An AI trained on that data can preserve those behavioral quirks. It transforms a memory from just a historical fact into a dynamic, accessible experience.
And the emotional benefits are clear. Providing reassurance, maybe closing conversations that were cut short, and offering a continued sense of connection.
Yes, especially in cases of sudden traumatic loss, where there's this desperate need to feel that the relationship didn't just vanish into thin air. The technology can provide a bridge, allowing the grieving person to process things on their own schedule, which can be genuinely therapeutic for some individuals.
But this is where we have to shift into that critical analysis. Experts are raising flags because the technology is so effective at generating comfort. We have to ask, does this technology help, or does it hinder the universally accepted, albeit painful, process of healing and moving forward? Is it a therapeutic tool, or is it a mechanism for avoidance?
And this is the crux of the entire ethical and psychological debate. It's centered around what we can call the problem of illusion. The rational mind understands the AI as a simulation, but the emotional system, the grieving, wounded heart, is engaging with something that looks, sounds, and responds like the person they lost. This creates a very dangerous emotional feedback loop.
What are the specific psychological concerns that rise to the level of potential harm here?
We can identify three major risks from the source material and the psychological literature. The first one is the most pressing: the risk of emotional dependency on the avatar. Grief requires eventually accepting the finality of the loss, the necessity of severance. If the AI avatar provides this constant, reliable source of comfort, it can prevent the necessary psychological process of internalization and detachment.
So it effectively becomes a digital crutch that never allows the user to stand on their own again, keeping the individual in a state of prolonged denial or non-acceptance.
That is the fear, precisely. If the simulation is too good, the transition from mourning to moving forward is fundamentally impeded. Second, we face the potential for false memory creation. This happens primarily with those generative AI models.
Ones that make up new answers.
Right. The system have to inevitably fill conversational gaps based on probabilities and its training data.
Can you give me a concrete example of how that false memory might be created?
Certainly. Let's say you ask the AI avatar, "What did you think of our plan to move across the country next year?" A question the deceased never actually addressed. The AI will generate an answer based on its established persona data, maybe confidently stating, "I always thought that city was a wonderful idea." The grieving person, desperate for that validation or connection, might internalize this fabricated opinion as a genuine, final thought of their loved one. And that complicates their actual memories. They start blending algorithmic output with reality.
So the technology isn't just archiving, it's actively editing and adding to the deceased person's narrative, which can lead to this deep psychological confusion about what was real and what was manufactured.
Exactly. And the third major concern is the broad issue of misuse of a deceased person's identity. This violates respect and privacy. If the AI model is proprietary to the tech company, or if other family members gain unauthorized access, the digital persona could be subjected to inappropriate use, trolling, or even used for commercial purposes against the wishes of the deceased. This raises huge questions about digital reputation management long after the person is gone.
The public reaction to this entire domain must be wildly complex. It can't be a simple yes or no.
Oh, it's intensely variable.
Yeah.
The source material really emphasizes that responses are heavily influenced by cultural context, individual spiritual beliefs about life and death, and most critically, a person's current stage of grief. Some people find the tools genuinely healing, particularly those focused on controlled storytelling.
Right.
Others find them profoundly unsettling, finding the simulation to be, ghoulish or a violation of natural boundaries. The conflict is widely felt.
This demands that we, the users, become acutely aware of our own psychological boundaries, and it leads us directly back to that central question posed by experts. Where should we draw the line between comfort and illusion?
And that line is not fixed. If an AI avatar can perfectly simulate their voice, their visual likeness, and access 99% of their historical communication data, the boundary between simulation and actual presence becomes microscopically thin. It requires the grieving person to exercise incredible cognitive control to maintain psychological health, which is a massive burden during such a vulnerable time.
The psychological stakes are clearly immense, and as we move into the legal frontier, we find that the laws governing these digital creations are just as messy, perhaps even more so than the psychological landscape.
The creation of a sophisticated AI trained on a person's entire digital footprint, texts, videos, voice synthesis, it introduces a completely novel class of asset and a critical legal challenge: the fundamental ambiguity of digital identity ownership.
Right. When a physical estate is settled, the assets, the house, the car, the bank accounts, are all clearly defined. But what exactly are the assets in the digital afterlife? Is the trained AI model an asset? Is the underlying data some kind of intellectual property?
It's a massive gray area. Ownership of the digital identity, the synthesized voice model, the persona trained on the data, the right to access and use that data, it all remains fundamentally unclear in most jurisdictions around the globe. If the AI model is built from someone's proprietary work emails or unreleased creative content, who owns the newly generated output of that AI? Is it the estate, the next of kin, or the tech company that provided the algorithm?
Which immediately creates the potential for huge legal disputes, particularly if the technology ever becomes monetizable. You could have family members fighting over access, control, or even the licensing rights to the digital representation of the deceased.
And this highlights the growing and urgent call for proactive legal intervention, specifically the implementation of comprehensive digital wills. A traditional will is wholly insufficient for this task.
So if a traditional will handles tangible assets, what must a digital will specifically address to manage this digital afterlife?
A digital will needs to define far more complex directives than just, passwords to social media.
Okay.
It has to address three critical components: access, deletion, and licensing.
All right.
First, access. Defining which family members or executors have the right to access the underlying data, the social media profiles, the email accounts. Second, deletion. Providing explicit instructions on what must be permanently removed after death. Should the AI model be destroyed? Should sensitive personal texts be purged?
Right.
And third, licensing,
Yeah.
specifically defining whether the individual consents to their data, their images, or their voice being used to create or maintain an AI representation, and setting clear boundaries on how that representation can interact or be monetized.
That issue of consent is absolutely paramount, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the millions of people who passed away before this technology was even a popular idea. They couldn't have planned for it.
That is the core legal crisis we are facing right now. We have to resolve the key legal questions for everyone who passed without a digital will. Who should ultimately control a digital identity after death? Should the immediate family have the automatic right, or should the individual's pre-death privacy preferences, even if they were unspoken, always take precedence?
And jurisdiction must be an absolute nightmare here. If the deceased lived in California, but the AI training company is based in Dublin and the server is in Singapore, whose laws even apply to the data and the resulting AI persona?
The complexity is staggering, particularly concerning international data privacy laws like GDPR in Europe, which afford sweeping rights to data subjects. The legal framework surrounding digital assets lags years, maybe decades, behind the technological capabilities. There's virtually no statutory guidance on how to define, manage, or transfer ownership of a digital AI persona. We are in a vacuum, relying on the service provider's terms of service rather than established law.
This really connects the practical decisions we talked about in the first section, choosing a print option versus a paperless one, to this massive global legal shift.
Yeah.
Every choice made now is a step toward creating a new form of digital legacy that lawyers are going to be sorting out for decades to come.
And that is the essential takeaway. Grief tech isn't some niche novelty. It is actively reshaping society's entire approach to memory, mourning, and legacy. It generates powerful comfort by providing a simulated connection, but it also generates profound concern by raising questions about psychological health, data ownership, and fundamental consent. Society is being tasked with writing the psychological, ethical, and legal rulebook for the digital afterlife in real time, under pressure from a human need that is desperate for solace. Hashtag rigorous deep dive.
This has been an incredibly rigorous deep dive. We started by grounding ourselves in the tangible history of mourning. The deliberate design of gatefold and graduated funeral programs, the physical weight of a keepsake. Then we tracked that efficient logistical shift enabled by the QR scannable digital memorials and video tributes, which fundamentally solved the problems of dissemination and remote access for modern services.
And then we plunged into the most profound shift of all, the rise of AI avatars and grief tech. This technology attempts not just to archive a life, but to dynamically simulate a personality. We've seen that while the human draw is immense, that visceral comfort of hearing a voice or revisiting a story, the ethical stakes are incredibly high, touching directly on emotional dependency, the creation of false memories, and this urgent, unresolved need for comprehensive digital estate planning.
It leaves us with a necessary final reflection that builds on everything we've explored today.
Indeed. If knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied, we have to apply critical thought not just to the technology itself, but to its long-term application. Let's revisit the core issue of consent in this burgeoning digital afterlife. These AI representations are trained entirely on historical data, the texts, emails, and voice recordings of a past digital life. How far into the future can we ethically project a person's digital presence, that simulation of their identity, without their explicit pre-death instruction, which so many people did not provide?
Right.
If this technology touches the most vulnerable human experience, which is grief, what responsibility does a society and the companies developing this tech have in ensuring healing takes precedence over a perpetual illusion?
That question of ethical projection, using the past to simulate an eternal presence, is a powerful thought for you to carry forward. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the digital afterlife. We look forward to exploring more complex topics with you soon.